Hello, everybody, and welcome to our live SAT cram session. Hopefully everybody can see me and hear me. We've got a few of you guys here. If you can see me and hear me, let me know in the chat. If you can't see me and hear me, hopefully you'll also let me know in the chat, but you wouldn't be able to tell that I'm saying this. So let me know in the chat. Can you see me? Can you hear me? And while you guys do that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. Hi, my name is Erika. I'm the Senior SAT and ACT Curriculum Manager here at Magoosh, and I'm going to be the host for today's live stream. Thank you, everybody. Oh, perfect. Okay, cool. So we are live. Now, this is a live cram session, and it is a Q&A format. So I don't have any material prepared. I'm just here to answer your questions. So if you have questions, throw those in the chat. We've already got some coming in. Amazing. Now, while we start to get some of those questions in the chat and ready to go, I want to go ahead and do a quick spiel about the purpose of this cram session. So if you come from our blog, or you got an email from us, or you watched the little promo video on our channel, you know that the purpose of this cram session is kind of around practice tests, especially if your test is this weekend. So practice tests are an extremely important part of your prep for an exam. They're extremely important along the way. Taking them every 2 to 4 weeks typically is a good idea, but they're especially important right before the test. Practicing in the context of a practice test is extremely important for making sure that not only do you have the content ready, that you have the knowledge and the skills, but that you're able to apply them in this very specific context, that you have the endurance that you need, that you're dealing with stress, that you're dealing with the timing, all of those good things. Now, especially in your last practice test, this is useful for getting you kind of in the right frame of mind, as well as making sure that you have knowledge of what you should be reviewing in your last few days before your exam. So hopefully you guys have had an opportunity to take a practice test recently, maybe this weekend. If you haven't had an opportunity to take your last practice test before your exam, there's still a little bit of time. We have some recommendations. I believe they're in the description of this live stream. If they're not, they're in the description of that promo video that we put up on our channel. Highly recommend that you go for one of those. So if you did take a practice test and questions came up about, the format or even specific topics there, feel free to ask those in the chat. If you have not taken a practice test and kind of have random questions about Magoosh or about prep in general, also throw those in the chat. Specifically, this is targeted toward the test this weekend, but if your test is later, you're more than welcome to ask questions. Go for it. With all of that said, looks like we've got some questions. Want to again remind you guys to subscribe to our channel and put on notifications. I know that I have some videos coming out soon. We've got tons of live events, tons of cool interviews and stuff coming out on our channel. So if you haven't subscribed or turned on notifications, do that, and you'll be able to keep up with all of our new content. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. All right. So first question with 3 crying faces. How do I stop getting 20 plus wrong in the reading section? Yeah, so the reading section is one that a lot of students struggle with. And people can struggle with it for different reasons. So Mohammed, I'm not entirely sure why specifically you are struggling, but I want to kind of address a few different issues that different people face. So one of the things that I see a lot with the reading section is time management. Some students don't finish the section, or they run out of time toward the end and have to guess on a lot. If that is the issue for you, one of the big things that I recommend is giving yourself checkpoints. So on the SAT, you've got approximately 13 minutes per passage. Knowing that and judging your time accordingly will really help you there. Other things that you can do for time management on reading, and I'm sure this is going to come up in other questions because it always comes up on these streams. I've actually got a video about it coming out soon. One of the other things that you can do is practice how you're reading those passages. So some students will read every single word. Some students will fully skip the passage and go to the questions. I recommend a middle approach where you are skimming the passage. So first and last sentences, anything with a powerful transition word, anything that is important and not just fluff. Anything that is fluff, skip. And then at the end of every paragraph, try to go, okay, what was the point of that paragraph? If we do that, we're going to be a lot more set up for success on those questions, and we're going to be able to get through them faster. Another strategy there, and this is kind of getting into, okay, what if timing is not a problem for me? I just get the questions wrong. Maybe I don't understand the passage or I don't understand the questions. So if that's you, then that strategy of skimming the passage, especially just coming up with a quick summary at the end of every paragraph, is going to do wonders for your comprehension, not allowing yourself to get worked up with details. But what's also going to help you is when you get to the questions, when you read the question, don't look at the answer choices. Don't do it. I know, that's kind of crazy. Got a video about this coming up. Don't look at the answer choices. Instead, pretend that this is like a fill in the blank, short response type question and come up with your own answer. And what that's going to do is it's going to help you trust yourself rather than trusting the test maker. And that's useful because trusting the test maker is a bad idea because they're trying to trick you. Those answer choices are traps. So when we read them, we fall into it. It's like we're standing on the edge of like a hole and we're looking into it. We're more likely to fall in. So what we're going to do is we're not going to look at those trap answers. We're going to come up with our own answer. Then we look at the answers and see which one matches. It feels like this is going to take a really long time, but I promise it doesn't. A lot of questions we're going to be able to predict just based on that initial skim that we did. For other questions, we're going to have to go hunting, but that skim is going to help us know where to look. And so this process goes actually relatively quickly, and eliminating answers is much faster because now we know what we're looking for. So a lot of recommendations, but those are my number one reading strategies. So kind of to recap, timing checkpoints, know how much time you have per passage. 2, when you're reading the passage, don't actually read the passage, skim it, focus on understanding the important parts, skip the rest, focus on comprehension as you go. Summarizing. 3, when you get to the questions, come up with your own answer. Don't trust the answer choices. Hopefully that helps. I found these strategies to be absolutely game-changing for a lot of my students. Again, videos coming out about these ideas soon. Hopefully that helps. Mohammed, if you have follow-up questions, throw those in the chat. Okay, next question. How do I do well in the math section? Okay, another kind of broad section question. Math section, so that one's a little bit different because there we don't have as much of the kind of overarching strategy. But we have kind of a similar response here in that a lot of doing well in the math section is managing your timing. So if you struggle with the math section, there's a really good chance that you struggle with finishing the math section or struggle with getting to all the questions. And again, that may not be you, but if that is you, one thing that's going to be really helpful is, again, coming up with timing checkpoints. Now, timing checkpoints vary a little bit on the math section. You can come up with how long you have per question and then check in every like 5 to 10 questions. But also worth noting that questions in the math sections typically get harder as you go through. So each section, right, has a multiple choice section and then a grid-in section. Through the multiple choice, it's going to go from easier to medium to hard, and then through the little grid-in, easy to medium to hard. Then it's going to switch from no calc to calc. And then it's going to do that process again. So easy to medium to hard in the multiple choice, and then easy to hard in the grid-in section. Hopefully that makes sense. So the goal there is to get through those first chunk of questions a little bit faster, so that then we have more time for that later chunk of questions. Now, I actually have a video about this coming out soon as well. So again, stay tuned. But one of the big things that's worth noting with that is that you may not get through all the questions. That's a thing, right? And it may be that the ones at the end are not the ones you get through because those are harder, or it might be that the first question in the section, you just read it and your brain shuts down, right? I don't know if that's happened to you, but it's happened to me. And it doesn't feel great. So what we're gonna do there is focus on skipping questions. We're gonna prioritize our time. Some questions we might spend 10 minutes on and still get wrong. We don't wanna spend much time with those questions at all. We wanna go, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just leave that and come back to it later. So we want to focus our time on questions we're more likely to get right. Now, are we still going to miss questions? Yeah, Probably. Are we still going to run out of time on questions? There's a decent chance, but at least the questions we're going to run out of time on are the ones that we acknowledge we were more likely to get wrong and more likely to spend a lot of time on. So that's a really important strategy. A lot of people think of time management as its own thing. It's actually really powerful for getting you a better score. Now, sometimes even when we skip questions, we do have time to come back in the end. Often a fresh set of eyes can help you get through that problem more easily. So skipping questions is a huge one on math. And then again, timing checkpoints. Video on that coming out soon. Other things for math. Okay, so if you have a little bit more time to prep, it's really important for math to know what's in the section because there's actually a lot of content you need to know. Kind of different than reading there, where reading is more about comprehension. Math, there are certain types of math you need to know. It's important then to know what's on the test and have studied those things and know what's on the test most frequently. If you have a resource like a Magoosh account, that's going to be really helpful there. Just making sure that you know what you need to know. If you do not have something like a Magoosh account, there is a free trial. I recommend you try that. Otherwise, there are other resources out there. There are plenty of free blog articles with what's on the test. Those are useful tools as well. Recommendation, prioritize what's on the test the most that you struggle with. So if you don't struggle with it, don't spend your time there. If it's not on the test a lot, don't spend your time there either. So things like trigonometry, they don't appear that often. Things like systems of equations do appear really often. So if you struggle with both, spend your time with systems of equations. Hopefully that makes sense. So kind of to recap, time management is a huge deal on the math section. Prioritize the questions you are most likely to get right in a relatively efficient amount of time. And then know what's on the test, study what's going to be on there a lot, and what you struggle with. Hope that helps. If you have follow-up questions, Alicia, throw those in the chat. Oh, Brea, SAT this weekend. Exciting. Probably a bunch of folks in here. SAT this weekend. If you've got the SAT this weekend, tell me in the chat. I want to know. Really quickly, I want to give some advice to folks who have the SAT this weekend. A little bit of, not like tough love, but some things some folks don't really want to hear if their test is this weekend. There probably isn't a whole ton you're going to learn between now and then. And that's okay. But what we can do at this point is solidify strategies and make sure we're in a good place mentally, emotionally, all that good stuff for our exams. So things like taking a practice test, just make sure that we have that routine down. Really useful. Things like reviewing notes if you have them. If you don't have them, things like reviewing missed questions. Really valuable. So knowing what sorts of mistakes you made and how you can do it differently next time, that's going to be the sort of thing that really translates well to your test day. So if you see something similar, you go, I recognize that, I see it, let me do it differently. Hopefully that helps. But more than anything, I recommend trying to keep calm, trying to sleep well, eat well, and review a little bit. Don't cram. That's not going to help you. One thing that really helps, and this sounds kind of hokey, but positive visualization is really useful. And that's not like, imagine getting into your top school and, living your best life and becoming, the greatest doctor the world's ever seen. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about imagining going into the test and imagining using positive strategies. Okay, what happens if you're struggling on a problem? What do you do to get past that? Okay, you're a little low on time. What do you do to make the most of your remaining time? All of that. And that helps with just kind of making those connections now so that they're easier to make on test day. Hope that helps. That wasn't anybody's question, but throwing that out there anyway. Oh, it is someone's question. Neha, amazing. Okay, cool. Those are some things you can do this week between now and Saturday. So review. If you haven't taken a practice test, take a practice test soon. Sooner is better than later. Review missed questions. Think about your strategies. Review those strategies maybe every day, and then start envisioning using those strategies. Hopefully that helps. Oh, looking like I'm a little fuzzy. Gonna try to fix that. Let's try that one more time. All right, we're a little bit fuzzy. That's okay. All right, hopefully that'll sort itself out. Okay, I have a month until my SAT and I'm stressing out. I feel like I don't have time. Yeah, so if you have a little bit longer on your SAT one, you have a little bit longer. At least it's not this Saturday. So there's that. But a month is not like the longest timeline in the world. So if you have about a month left, recommendations. One, come up with a practice test schedule. Typically, I recommend a test the weekend before your exam, and then every like 2 to 3 weeks before that. So you probably have like 2 or 3 more practice test days available. Go ahead and just plan those out, set aside the time, plan for it. Things that you can do between now and then. Because that probably isn't enough time to do like a comprehensive review for the whole test, which frankly I don't recommend in most cases, figure out what you need to work on. So in Magoosh, there's a diagnostic that can tell you which section you need to spend more time with. Or if you've noticed, particular things in school or in your practice test that you struggle with, spend time there to try to raise that particular score or raise the number of questions you can write in that particular area. Other ways that you can make that study more effective, I talked about reviewing your mistakes or reviewing your notes. If you're going, I don't keep track of my mistakes or I don't have notes, that is a thing that you can do. So using something like an error log is going to really increase the quality of your study. For those of you who have your test this weekend, that's something you can do with your last practice test. Really, really recommend. If you have more study time, that's something you can do with just your regular day-to-day practice as well as your practice test. So the value there basically is that for every missed question, you're going to be able to go, okay, what did I do wrong? Why did I do that? And then how can I fix that on a new problem? Now, a lot of people don't do this process at all. They just drill a bunch of questions and they're like, cool, I got like 80% of them right. And then they just leave it at that. But what that leads to is making that same mistake over and over and over. Not great. What some people do is they get, okay, what did I do wrong? And maybe how can I do this right, like at a high level? But they don't explore specifically what they did wrong, why they did it wrong, and how they can fix that specific thing. So even then, they end up making the same mistake over and over. So if you have a more limited timeline, what will help you the most is being really, really focused and making sure that you're getting the mileage out of that time. So ways to do that, practice tests, set your schedule now. Error log. So error logging. And then third, I guess, order reversed, is focusing on the stuff that you most need to focus on. One of the other perks of doing an error log is that it will help you see what sorts of questions you're missing and what you should be focused on. So again, you can kind of recalibrate and spend your time there. So practice tests, do the stuff that is most important for you personally, and then make sure you are learning from it. Hopefully that helps. I'm going to go ahead and just close a little thing on my camera to see if I can get back in focus. Be right back. Okay, it worked. All right. Hopefully that answers your question, Deliana. If you have follow-ups, throw those in the chat. And hopefully that helped everybody else too. Okay. Further questions. Yeah. All right, let's see. We've got a recommendation for Khan Academy in the chat. That's another great free resource. Again, just want to plug the fact that you can get a 7-day free trial of Magoosh as well. Free resources are really, really valuable. And then if you like Magoosh, you can extend your access. All right. How do you recommend practicing for the essay? Really great question there. So number one on the essay is I wouldn't practice for it that much, which might not be exactly the answer you were expecting. So the essay is the least important section of the exam for pretty much all students. There's kind of two reasons for the essay. Reason number one is to figure out if you are meeting benchmarks just kind of in general. So can you successfully read? Can you successfully analyze? Can you successfully write? And then reason number two is to make sure that you didn't plagiarize your admissions essays. So what they're going to do is just see how you wrote on your admissions essays and then see how you write on your SAT essay and then go, is it conceivable that the same person wrote both? Now, they recognize that the SAT essay is something you write quickly. So they're not expecting it to be quite the same quality as your admissions essays. This is going to be something like they're going to look at like your level of fluency with the English language. They're going to look at just kind of traits of how you write, how you sound, see if you're writing similar types of sentences, that kind of thing. So if you're going, my writing isn't great on my SAT essay, as long as you wrote your admissions essays, you're fine. If you had someone who was maybe a little heavy-handed with their editing of your admissions essays, that might be something to think about if you haven't submitted those admissions essays yet, just to make sure that it's in your own words. Make sure that someone who's editing is making suggestions and then you write based on those suggestions, or they're changing things like grammar, vocabulary, relatively minor. And obviously don't plagiarize your essay. They will often find out. Okay, so how do you study for your essay? I also have a video coming out about this. Wow, incredible. You would think these questions were planted, but they're not. So if you are trying to prep for your essay, number one thing is know what they're looking for in the essay. Know what they want you to write. And what they want you to write is something relatively simple. Typically, that is a 5-paragraph essay with a 2 to 3 sentence introduction, 1 to 3 sentence conclusion. Very simple. Your body paragraph is going to have an intro sentence, and then it's going to have one example, and then you're going to analyze that example. That's about it. So know what they're looking for. Know the template for how to build that essay. You do not need to reinvent the wheel here. Worth noting on this essay, that the essay graders are not going to be reading it for very long. They are not, which means that they're not going to appreciate any like artistry in that essay. So don't be particularly artful here. Again, know what they're looking for. Also know what people struggle with on this essay. This is somewhere where folks have a harder time because it's harder to find someone to grade your essay in advance. So sometimes folks don't know where they struggle, but the vast majority of students on the essay struggle with the analysis portion. Reading, the average score is a 6, which is you passed, basically. Writing, the average score is a 6. You passed, basically. The average score on analysis is a 2. Which is the lowest possible score. So that's not great, right? So focusing on analysis. So analysis is basically going, okay, what is the author doing here? Why is the author doing that? What impact does that have on the reader? And then how does that make the reader agree with the author's argument? Explore that. A lot of students are like, but it's so obvious. Pretend that your grader is like an alien. They have a perfect understanding of the English language, but they're unable to comprehend or analyze it all. So we're going to just kind of spell everything out for them. And when you think you've analyzed enough, just dig one shovel deeper. And that is how you can get a good score on the essay. So know your template, know what they're looking for, write to that template. Don't reinvent the wheel. Focus on analysis. That's the big one. And then if you want to practice for it, doing a couple of essays, I usually recommend doing one untimed and then do 1 or 2 times, typically as part of a practice test, is going to be really useful. Again, that comes at the end of the test. So knowing that you can do that when you are tired is also going to be useful there. And then again, kind of the takeaway from the beginning, this is less important than the rest of the exam. So make sure that you're not overemphasizing it. Our goal here is not a perfect essay score. If you get a 6 in each of the sections, you're gold. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. What is the most efficient study plan? So kind of already answered that a little bit, but to kind of recap on that one, the most efficient study plan depends on you. It's going to be different for everybody. The most efficient study plan is going to focus on your weaknesses and is going to focus on the weaknesses of yours that appear the most frequently on the test, if that makes sense. So for you to have your most efficient study plan, it's going to depend on you knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are. It's also going to depend on making sure you know what's on the test. So a lot of folks who are self-studying will study stuff that just doesn't really matter for the exam. Sometimes having guidance from a program like Magoosh or like other programs will help make sure that you are studying things that actually matter. Hopefully that helps. Now, of course, this does vary a little bit from person to person. If you are applying for like a very specific program, they might care more about your scores in a certain section. In that case, you'd want to prioritize that section. In general, for schools, they like to see that your scores are relatively balanced, relatively even. So usually if like your reading and writing score is higher than your math score, you'll want to build up math. If your math is higher than your reading and writing, you'll want to build up reading and writing. Usually also that's a good way to get more points because typically the points lower down are easier to get than the points higher up. Hopefully that helps. Can I give some advice on how to answer questions in the reading section? So I talked about that a little bit earlier, but to kind of recap there, making your own prediction is huge. So when you read the question, come up with your own answer and then look at those answer choices. Got a video on this coming out soon. So if it's a more general question, you should be able to come up with that prediction relatively easily. Maybe not easily, but without looking back at the passage. If it's more specific, you're going to have to go hunting. But the fact that we've already done a skim and that we've got kind of a little bit of a summary, maybe mentally, maybe jotted down in 5 or fewer words next to the paragraph, we've got a summary for each paragraph, is going to help us go, okay, where would I find the answer for this question? Hopefully we can hone in on a paragraph and then use words from that question stem, like, oh, it says dinosaur. Okay, do I see the word dinosaur in this paragraph? And then we can go, oh, great, it's in the 3rd sentence of the paragraph. What does that say? We can come up with our own prediction then, and then we look at the answer choices. Then it's much easier to go, oh, that one literally matches my prediction. Cool, I don't even have to look at the others. Or to go, that doesn't match, maybe that one doesn't match. Okay, it's the one I said maybe too. And then we're done. So predicting is going to be, again, I think the most powerful strategy on the reading section. Second most powerful strategies have to do with how we get through that passage. Talked about that a little bit earlier. I think it was the first question I answered. So feel free to watch that back once this video goes up. Cool. How do I increase my score on the SAT? Super broad question, but a question everybody has. It totally makes sense. Kind of the same answer as I gave to a question earlier, which is find what you're weak at and work on that. A lot of people want to work on what they're good at or just what they find first. That's not going to be the most effective way to improve your score. Find what you struggle with that appears on the test frequently. So again, if you struggle with something like 3D figures, that does show up, but not that often, may not be the best thing to focus on. If you struggle with something like percents, okay, that shows up a lot. Spend your time there. So find what you struggle with, work on that. That'll raise your score. Again, focus on the sections that you struggle with more, so your score can come out a little more balanced. Hope that helps. And take practice tests. A lot of students who put in a lot of study don't take practice tests, and then they really struggle on test day with getting the timing right, getting the endurance right, and all of the stuff that they did practice doesn't really come to the table. Take practice tests, make sure that you can implement those skills and strategies in that testing context. All right. Let's see. Ooh, gonna try the camera thing one more time. Sorry about that. Okay. I gotta figure this camera out. Okay. Can I elaborate on something like super scoring? Absolutely. So super scoring, I apologize if you can hear some motorcycles outside. Super scoring is all it is basically is if you take the test multiple times, they will take your scores that were highest for each section and lump them together to give something like a super score. Now, frankly, I think that super scoring is a little bit kind of a vanity thing because if you are sending your scores to schools, they will see all of those individual scores. So they can tell what your scores are. They can tell that it's super scored. And if you don't super score, like if you don't pay to do that, then they'll still be able to figure out what that super score is. These admissions people are smart, so they can figure these things out. So super scoring is basically just a way to make sure that that highest number appears somewhere on your application. Do I think that has much of an impact on admissions? I'm not an admissions person, so I can't say for sure, but I doubt it. A lot of schools, again, will just kind of figure out that super score on their own. Some schools don't look at super scores. They care about what you can do in one sitting. So they'll look at your most recent test or your best test or whatever. So super scoring, again, I think it's a little bit of a vanity thing. I don't know that you really need to do that. But again, I'm not an admissions person. That's just how it works. If you want more information on that, I'm going to go ahead and bet that we have blog articles on the topic on our Magoosh High School blog. There are also other blog articles out there from other test prep companies. If you just go ahead and Google super scoring SAT or super score SAT, things will come up, especially if you do something like super score SAT Magoosh. So I'd recommend looking there for someone who knows more than me, someone who's done more admissions stuff than me. Coach Tony, who does stuff on our YouTube channel all the time, does live events. He would be a great person to ask that question. So I apologize. That's not super my wheelhouse, but that's how super scoring works. Cool. All right. The math section is hard. Yeah, I totally feel you on that. Okay, what questions should I approach first? So that's a great question. And that kind of builds on what we were talking about earlier, which is going, hey, let's make sure that you're prioritizing things you're pretty sure you can get right. So what you should approach first does depend a little bit on the section. In general, I recommend typically kind of starting at the beginning and going toward the end, but that's not necessarily true for every single section. So let's start with math. I recommend starting at the beginning. Reason for that is that the test maker is trying to put easier questions at the beginning and then get a little bit harder. Similarly, it's easier to make a guess on multiple choice than it is on grid-ins. So I recommend starting at the beginning. And then what I recommend is giving each problem just kind of a quick shake. So that might be, 15 to 20 seconds of reading through the question, maybe jotting some stuff down as you get to it, and kind of going, okay, how might I approach this? And if you think you've got like a good idea, you're feeling good, go ahead and go for it. Now, if you read the question and you're like, what? I have no idea what that's saying. This is making me feel stressed. And you're starting to maybe do a little bit of a spiral, skip it, move on. So it isn't so much that you're going to immediately start with a question that appears a certain way as you're going to give a problem a shake, and then you're going to go ahead and move on if it's not serving you, if that makes sense. There are also some problems that you'll start and you'll think that you've got it, and then halfway through you're like, whoa, I don't got it. You can still skip that one. Maybe eliminate answers that you know are wrong. Make sure that's written down somewhere so you can come back later, but move on. Don't let yourself get sucked into the sunk cost fallacy. On the other hand, there could be a problem that you look at and it's like so long and so scary and you're going, oh no, there is no way. Give it a shake. right? Give it 15 to 20 seconds. Often the problems that appear the most scary are actually pretty simplistic, like plug and chug type questions on the math, or, on reading or writing something else equally simple. So give it a shake. You could be proven right. No, this is not worth my time, move on. Or you might be able to do it relatively quickly. So hopefully that makes sense. It's going to be really, really personal. For something like writing, that's going to be also pretty similar, where we're going to start at the beginning and kind of just work through. Often questions that are more grammar oriented are going to be quicker than ones that are more kind of rhetoric oriented. So things like putting sentences in different places, putting in transition words, figuring out if the author should keep or delete something, things like that. Typically, if it's got like an actual question at the beginning instead of just answer choices, that's going to take a little bit longer often. So if you're a little more concerned on time, maybe those are ones to move past. For something like reading, and this is a really long answer, for something like reading, again, similarly, if you're struggling with a question, you can move on. If you know in advance that you struggle with inference, maybe that's one if you're low on time to skip. But you can also go in with a knowledge of which passage types are easier for you. So if you know that historical documents, you don't like them, they're not great, they're not your favorite, maybe don't do that. Maybe save it for the end. Start with something that you know is going to be more comfortable for you. So maybe that literary narrative or fiction is your guy. Yeah, that's the first one. Great, start there. Maybe that's not a great one for you. Don't start with that one. Start with something that you're more confident with. Get through it, get kind of a jump on your timing, get your confidence up, and then come back later. One other piece to this, we've talked about checkpoints. One of the useful things about checkpoints is not only does it keep us on track, but it can tell us if we're off track. So if we're a little bit behind on a checkpoint, so like more than a minute or two behind, that's when we'll want to start considering things like skipping a little more rapidly. So that's maybe if we look at a question, we're like, what? We just go, okay, nope, another time. Or where we're going like, okay, I think I might have an idea. If we were on time, maybe we'd go for it. But since we're behind time, maybe we skip it. So the answer to this question is pretty complicated. You can know some things going in, know some types of questions that you might be more likely to skip, more passages that you might be more likely to skip and then come back to later. But typically it's going to be something that you kind of give a fair shake and then move on when you know that it's maybe not going as smoothly. Maybe coming back later would be more useful, but be really willing to move on. Want to clarify, when I say skip, I mean come back and answer it later. Even if it's a guess, you will not lose points for guessing wrong. But if you leave it blank, you will lose points. So always, 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 always fill in an answer, bubble something in, even if it is randomly at the end. Hopefully that helps. It's going to be very personal. This is why we practice. This is why we do practice tests, so we know these things going in, and so we get used to that feeling of skipping questions. All right, hope that helps. Alicia says, I recommend getting up early so you have time to wake up and eat a good meal, sleep good the night before. Yes, definitely do that. A couple of recommendations for test day. Make sure you sleep. Don't cram the night before. In fact, don't really study the night before. Just do some review of your notes, of your strategies. I recommend a couple of days before your test, writing down all of your strategies for each section on a piece of paper. So you can just read that the night before your test. So those are all fresh right at the front of your mind for your test day. In the morning before your test, I really agree with eating a good breakfast, but only if you are a breakfast person. Some people get sick if they eat a big breakfast. So if that's you, don't eat a big breakfast. Don't make yourself sick. Eat something normal that you know will make you feel good for your test day. Make sure you know where your testing center is, that you have directions, that you have enough time. Lay out your outfit, get all of your stuff together in advance so that you don't really have to think that morning. And then that morning, make sure that you give yourself enough time to wake up. It's important to get a good night's sleep, but it's just as important to be awake for your test day. I recommend reading something the morning of your test That's going to help make sure that your brain is alert and that you remember how to read when you open up the reading section. A lot of students will just kind of roll out of bed with, the intention of, hey, I'm going to get as much sleep as I can. They go into the test center, and then that first passage is kind of their brain still booting up. Not great. And that can put us behind time. It can cause us to miss questions and then get us kind of in a weird mental and emotional state for the rest of the test. Read something in the morning, make sure your brain is alert, think about your strategies, and that's just going to make sure that not only are you physically awake, but mentally awake, and you can hit the ground running with reading. Hope that helps. Okay, let me check on our time. Okay, we're doing great. What do we got next? How can we use error logging with the reading section since it's kind of specific? That's a really great question, Neha. Great. So for error logging on the reading section, that's something that students struggle with a little bit more. Because with math, it's like, make sure that your scratch work is neat, or make sure on exponents questions that you're thinking about getting the same base, or blah, blah, blah. And usually it's a little more specific. With reading, you're going to need to be really personal. So your personal strategy for reading might be something like, go back to your prediction. Don't let yourself get sucked into a wrong answer choice if it doesn't match your prediction. It might be something like, if there is extreme language in an answer choice, don't fall for that, right? Or be skeptical of it. Or it might be, look at the first word in the answer choice. Does that actually match? Or it might be, ran out of time, spent too much time reading every single word of the passage. Remember that not every word matters. Focus on the important sentences. So it's going to be really personal, and it's going to be kind of more strategy oriented, higher level strategy oriented than something content specific, if that makes sense. Often it's also more associated with wrong answers and wrong answer strategy than getting to the right answer, if that makes sense. So it's going to be a lot of, why should I have recognized that this answer was wrong, or where did my strategy go wrong here? Hopefully that makes sense. Or if you didn't find it in the passage, going, how should I have found that? Was there a keyword I should have located? Did I misinterpret this paragraph? Did I focus too much on a detail that I shouldn't have? Or blah, blah, blah. So you can still do it, but it just does take a little bit of extra energy. Again, figuring out what you did wrong, why you did it, and how you can fix it in a similar problem. It's going to be, there's not going to be like a quick and easy answer for each one. It's an exploration. It takes time. You're going to have a different answer for each question, and that's okay. So know that this process takes time, but it is valuable. It's a way to get more out of fewer questions. Hopefully that helps. It's something to practice. It's something that becomes easier with time. Cool. All right. College essay. Did I say college essay? If I said college essay at a certain point, I apologize. Want to just quickly clarify what I was saying before. The point of the SAT essay is to make sure that you're meeting certain benchmarks, and that you're not plagiarizing your admissions essays. Hopefully that makes sense. I apologize if I misspoke earlier. If you have any follow-up questions on that, just throw that in there. I want to make sure that we're clear. All right. Deliana says, balancing school and the SAT is extremely difficult. How can I make an efficient study plan with the little time that I have? Yeah, it is. It is really tough. And I don't want to say otherwise. It is tricky to be in high school. I've never been busier since. I've never been busier since. I have been less busy ever since like my junior year of high school. So I just want to let you guys know that. Hopefully things play out for you the way they played out for me. So yes, it is very difficult to manage, especially if you have a rigorous course load, if you're in a lot of APs, which is also really important for admissions. It's tough. So big recommendation there is make sure your study is efficient and effective. Don't try to do every single problem out there. Don't try to study everything on the test. Focus on the stuff that's going to get you points. That's one of the best ways that you can help balance is by making sure that your time is useful. Second, make sure that when you're doing that stuff, you are doing it in an effective way. So focusing on things like error logging, making sure you're taking practice tests every few weeks. Again, that's going to make sure that the quality of your study is high, that you're learning from it, that you're not repeating mistakes, that you're making sure you can implement it in a test setting, et cetera, et cetera. So high quality study, focus on the stuff that's most important, and do your study in an effective way. Beyond that, it's really helpful to make sure that you have a schedule. If you're just kind of going, hey, I'm going to fit in my study wherever I have time and I'm going to figure it out, or if you're doing like 5-hour study binges over the weekend, typically that's not the most effective. Typically, one, we don't find as much study time as we want, or if we do a lot of study in like a binge type way, our study doesn't end up very effective. So I would recommend if you are trying to balance your work and your school, which probably most of you are, setting a schedule at the beginning of each week. So going, okay, what days realistically am I going to be able to study? Realistically, when am I going to be able to do that? And realistically, how much time am I going to be able to spend? And I said the word realistically 3 times because I want you to be realistic. A lot of people are like, I'm going to get in 20 hours of study this week. That's probably not realistic, right? So make sure that your study plan is based on your schedule. If you have a lot of classes going on, if you've got a project, if you've got, extracurriculars, maybe that's not going to happen. So literally sit down and block out the times each week when you're going to study. Set that aside, and that's going to help you stick to that more regularly. It's just planning when that's going to happen. Hopefully that makes sense. One other thing that I want to shout out, if you are busy and stressed, oftentimes your study isn't always going to be perfect. And what I want to let you guys know is that it's better to do less study and make sure that study is high quality than do more study that isn't super high quality. So if you are studying and you're like, I shouldn't have missed that question, or this isn't sinking in, and I've made the same mistake 3 times, step away. Maybe try a different section. Maybe your brain's going to work better on writing than it did on math, or just walk away and watch TV or go to bed or do your homework or whatever, and come back another time. It is better to not make a mistake than to make a mistake repeatedly. So the first time you make a mistake, awesome learning opportunity, but each subsequent time you make a mistake, you're building a bad habit. So if your study isn't going well, walk away, come back later, try to make sure your study quality is high. So quality over quantity, and that's one of the best ways you can, again, balance study and school. Hopefully that helps. All right. Oh, okay. So we had questions on admissions essays. Sorry, I did not understand that question. So admissions essays, basically, if you are applying to a college, you are likely going to have to write an essay as part of that application. Sorry if I assumed that was known. Maybe you guys haven't seen those applications yet. That's okay. So different schools will have different admissions essays. So part of the Common App will be writing specific essays. Part of individual school applications is often writing an essay. Some schools don't require it at all. Typically, it's about like, what's an experience that, really shaped your life, or talk about, a time where you were different, or a time that you struggled, or a time that you learned something, or something like that. Some schools have really specific ones. I know I wrote I wrote one that was like, what would you put on your headstone, which was really very strange, but it was a fun one. So you will likely have to write some essays for that specific college. Those are not graded. You don't get a score on that, or at least one that you see. Those are some things that the admissions committee are going to look at with things like your extracurriculars, your letters of recommendation, blah, blah, blah. So what they're going to do, because some students will pay people to write those essays for them or will plagiarize them, what they're going to do is they're going to look at your SAT essay, which most likely you cannot plagiarize, right? That one's probably written by you. And they're going to compare that to your admissions essays and just go, conceivably, are these written by the same person? Hopefully that makes sense. And that's just a quick check on academic honesty to make sure, again, that all of the pieces of the application were done by you. If anyone has any questions on that, I'm happy to answer. If you have questions about like how to make your admissions essays good, I probably can't answer that particularly well because, again, I'm not an admissions person. I'm an SAT person. All right. I think that's all the questions we've got in the chat right now. We still have another 10 minutes on our stream. So if you have questions, now is a really, really good time to throw those in the chat. I'm still here and I'll hang out for even a little bit after the hour if needed to answer some questions. But yeah, this is an opportunity for you to get the help that you need before your test. So feel free if you have questions to throw those in the chat. All right. Let me think if there's anything else that I should answer while I'm here. So if you guys have any other questions, again, throw those in the chat. But I do want to just really quickly, again, reiterate the importance of in the couple of days before your exam, putting together review. So I mentioned putting together a strategy guide. That is one of the most useful things. Typically, I recommend that after going over your last practice test. So I recommend taking that practice test and error logging it, and then taking all the strategies from that, all the strategies you learned from your study, strategies you learned from previous practice tests, blah, 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 and just compiling them on one sheet of paper divided out by section. So I typically recommend a reading section, a writing section, a math section, maybe a little subsection under math for no calculator, and then essay. And then for each of those, going, okay, what are my top strategies? Now, I want to be clear about strategy. Strategies are things that you do, not things that you remember. So this isn't, write out all the formulas you need to know. It's writing out, okay, what should I see in the question that should make me recognize I should use that formula? Does that distinction make sense? So it's more about what do you see and then what do you do as a result. So writing out your strategies as a prompt response is going to be really, really helpful. So if I'm low on time, I'm going to bleh. If I see this, I'm going to bleh. If my answer choices feature a semicolon, I'm going to bleh. If my question has the word infer, I'm going to bleh, and so on and so forth. So that's going to just help us know what to do and know when to do it on our test day, rather than just writing down all the stuff we need to remember. Because hopefully at this point, we remember it. If not, probably not a ton of memorization is going to get done before test day. All right. So strategy guide, really, really valuable. Review your error log. All right. Question. I was planning on doing a reading section after this session because that's what I really struggle on. Would that be a good idea, or should I focus on reviewing my past errors? That's a great question. If you did a practice test this weekend, hopefully you did a practice test this weekend, then I would say it wouldn't be bad to do a reading section. What I would caution you on is just making sure that you're not going to overload yourself. Assuming you've already been at school today, If you took your practice test yesterday and you're taking your reading section in the evening, you might not be at your best, right? So maybe consider, could you take it in the morning before school? Or really just be honest with yourself before you take it. Is this going to be effective for me? Am I going to do my best work? Because when you're taking your test, you're going to be taking it in the morning when you're fresh, hopefully after a good night's sleep. So if you're going, yeah, this might not be my best performance, I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend maybe spending some extra time with your errors. But if you're feeling good, you're feeling fresh, you're feeling ready to go, or you can do it maybe tomorrow morning or something like that, then I'd say go for it. I would recommend, if you can, review your reading errors on your most recent practice test and then take that section. So maybe that pushes your section out to like Tuesday or Wednesday. That's okay. But then you have an opportunity to try to implement what you learned from your last practice test in that reading section. Hope that helps. So then you can avoid some of those mistakes that you made before and practice these new strategies so that those are something that you're comfortable with, that you've tried, that you've hopefully succeeded on when you go into your test day. And that's just going to help you learn more and be more effective on the tape. This actually reminds me of something that I want to throw out there. So I've been talking a lot about the importance of practice tests. And yes, practice tests are so important. They're so, so good. And a lot of students just don't take them enough, and they should take them more. But some students take practice tests like way too often, and that is also not great. So if you are going, I'm going to take like 3 practice tests this week, or I'm going to take 2 practice tests this week. Don't do that. Or I took a practice test this weekend and I'm going to take another. Don't do that. Because what's going to happen, one, is you're probably going to be too tired on your test day and not at your most effective. But what's also likely to happen is that you're not going to learn between your tests. And that test isn't going to give you a lot of benefit. In fact, you might make the same mistakes and then build a bad habit. So practice tests are meant to be a sometimes thing. They're meant to be something that we do every 2 to 4 weeks after we've had the opportunity to learn, to grow, to implement, so that we're hopefully improving on something for our practice test. So make sure that you're not going too far in either directions. Don't be scared of practice tests. They're really, really useful, but don't take them too regularly. So if you haven't taken a practice test in the last 2 weeks, maybe take one in the next couple days. But if you have taken one in the last week or so, don't do it. Focus this time on review. Hopefully that helps. All right, we got 3 more minutes. If anyone's got questions, now is the time. Happy to answer. And again, just want to plug, if you are thinking about doing a practice test in the next couple of days, you're realizing it's been a bit since you've done one, maybe you haven't done one at all, we have a totally free Magoosh PDF practice test, even if you are not a Magoosh student. That is linked either in the description on this video or in the description on the promo video on our channel. You can access that. If you are a Magoosh student, probably don't do that one because that will likely have some repeat questions from your practice in your Magoosh account. There, you might want to take the online practice test, which generates up to 4 new tests. Pretty cool. You can also use some of the official SAT practice tests. There are like 8 of them, so highly recommend those. We have one of those, again, linked in the promo video, but if you just Google SAT practice test College Board, you'll find a list of those. And again, those are highly realistic exams, so they're really good ones. All right. Last chance for any final questions. I'm happy to stick around if I see any come in. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap the sucker up. Thank you so much for being here today. Hopefully this helped. Hopefully you got your questions answered. If you have more questions that come up after after this live stream ends, feel free to throw those in the comment on this live stream. This live stream is going to be uploaded after the fact. So we have folks who watch these comments. So please throw any questions that you have there. Or if you're watching this video later, again, if you have questions, you can ask those there and we'll get back to you. Again, thank you so much for coming. Take a practice test if you haven't yet, and good luck with your test day. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.